in the treaty between beast and reptile, or if reptile isn't in a worship with a serpent, whereas the beast and the serpent are made alike in Jesus Christ, in all unbeliefs and beliefs. Believe it or not, in the sword of light there is darkness, and in that darkness there is called a law that is foolish, in terminologies of unbelievers, or them in the great happening of hard work in the law turn cold in the heart towards Jesus Christ, for they see the ugly, and in their lives of chaos and destruction and toiling trouble, in the delusion of the sun that we live under, toiling trouble, the law having no faith in uh, what is called uh, the commandments. And in the commandments, is there also a practice of law where mundane is separate from the spiritual world that works within the spirit, that is tied to a soul and its wonderful chastening for a fuel or a fire, and what purity of a gaseous flesh might find itself to be a part of it in the sacrificial wormwood, or the animals that eat from the gas that forms at the bottom of a tree, like algae or other kinds of molds and fungus and things to that nature that are found worthless to a tree. Believe it or not, the wasted or the worthless is the trash of a tree found to be in a dead mold of a branch fallen off, but in its purpose of sacrifice, it has much manna and much life and much words that are worthy in the mouth of that who is favored by an archangel. In the double bridle of Jormungandr, being uh, the Leviathan in uh, Job 41, 1 and 2, the Leviathan, who is a double bridle to Jesus Christ, or Saint Matthew, who is said to be married to Jesus Christ, or in the Bible of Revelations, where the wife comes down to marry the husband. In the idea of hermaphroditic soul and Alpha and Omega, be it that in law practice, man made by woman, or woman, how do you explain it without woman who is with a daily sacrifice for law. That's a better way to explain it. Law not just worked in a mundane, but worked in mundane being that flesh of waste, that garbage, that trash, that wormwood, that the sacrificial animal eat from in um, in the sacrifice of church sacrifices that are used in the Colosseum of Caesar, which is basically a strip club with uh, the Baptist and Roman Catholic churches that says, "Blessed is the man who lays his life down for others," and so on. In all of the Passover feasts, the the other ones are noted as well, the reptiles that are unclean and can't be cleaned unless they're purified in that who is found worthy in the Leviathan. The only one that rises up with Jesus Christ in the crossing in what is described in the Bible as the prolonged life or everlasting life with the Lord or the Lord of hosts, or as a man in the flesh favored by the Lord and the archangels to devout life for life, or give and take in faith, lying down oneself for friends, family, or people you don't even know in whatever arranged practice of law, whether it is called law or not, or lawless in the frame. This is the irony of the Bible, is the governing system to frame a man of riches. And I'm not saying riches as in money, but riches as in God buying his child back, and that child being able to speak off of the pureness of what uh, is said to be unclean, that pureness of what is said to be unclean. This is what I'm talking about. The closest thing to God being the child that crawls on his belly, just like a reptile, just like a snake or a worm. And that dirty little child's got a snotty nose and dirt all tattooed to his face because of it. That unclean little child, that unworthy, that trash, that wormwood, that garbage, that waste, that power in a man's mouth that a lot of people don't, of shallow minds, see at the rim of wisdom. The very rim of wisdom, man is able to uh, be tremendously great with in speaking by offering oneself in a good tithe or a bad tithe. Whether the tithe is good, bad, or ugly, it still is a tithe. God, who plays with his children's minds, and those who cast their lots into toil, trouble, in and out of the instrument of life. That is to say, the tool for God's work, or the tool for the law's work, which is said to be the perishing cup, or the worthless cup, the war cup, the hatred cup, the vile cup, the anger cup, the cup of mocking and blasphemy cup, the cup of money, the cup of waste, foolishness, and scorners, and all of the accumulated people who joined in on the bandwagon. But that's that's one cup, and then there's one true saint to the Lord. If not the Lord be the Lord, or the Father be the Son, and the Son be the Father, in a uh, in a birth and death, birth and death, birth and death, everlasting life, living for the sake of self, even if it is in others, knowing that the stars are a great multitude of many islands in a darkness. And yet we know that what takes place on earth, it also happens in heaven, because we see the stars up there in a great multitude of many islands with the the mark of the beast: unclean, clean, ugly, vile, taint, corrupt, full of hatred, anger, a soul that is valiant to tame that demon and offer it up to God as something uh, worthy. But the stars that appear to be in a great multitude of islands in a dark union, a space that is inseparable. It is not the same as we see it in this world, though we have found a way to separate God from people by the moral law. A child, for instance, born and not knowing nothing, and yet uh, growing up, it has a Christ with it, a lust, imaginary snotty nosed friend, a dead water, a dead waste, a dead carbon mold, algae, a dead manna, a dead wormwood, a dead beast that eats that stuff. You know what I mean? And it molds into that little child as a self friend. And the more and more we grow into the unclean moral ethic where child is in a constant correction for being a child, not knowing sin and not seeing the display of man and how they decided to raise up a foundation of people in a country or whatever prospect it abides in. The way it is brought up is to separate God from the people. And in doing so, the world is in a star in one place and in a star at another place, whereas the universe is in a star at one place and in a star at another place, and so on. And you never quite know if that perfectly placed time and moment in the world. This is so intricate of a thought as I reached in deep within myself to understand the star in the world in a perfect place, in the same place that it is in the universe at a perfect time, in a perfect puzzle, architectural design as the other stars that live in this world, in a perfect place, a perfect puzzle to actually display that um, uh, astrological sign or chart where the stars are put into place in a perfect order. A group of people in a perfect order in the world, just as a group of people are in a perfect order in the stars. And you never know. The Bible talks intricately about the end times that no one will never know the end times or the hour that which the rejecting faith or the rejected stones will come, and in that rejection a great falling and burning and awake in Ragnarok, also known as Jormungandr, the only one worthy to rise with Jesus Christ as Saint Matthew, the only one worthy against the giants or the valleys of the fields of uh, despair, the halls of hate, and the rewards of nothing, giving one's life up or laying it down for others, other than a great story and testimony to give in hopes that in the rejection or the beating of a candlestick, the rejection of the stones that are said to be cast out, uh, when they put the two stones, Saint Matthew or Jormungandr and Satan, or Saint Matthew and Jesus Christ to the cross and rejected them, they cast their stones down onto the world. And it was Michael the archangel that said 1/3 of the land had burned with the sea in a great awake, as it is with a child that is born into this world with a lot of energy, except except a child knows not sin, whereas a man child in Revelations 12, a multitude of men children, they know sin and they're awake to it because we've taught ourselves all these things in raising the foundation of the people in whatever prospect that it abides or whatever plank that it walks or whatever ship that it made, whether people choose in the blacksmithing of a tool work for God or work for a law, Satan divided by Satan, or Jormungandr divided by Satan, or Saint Matthew divided by Jesus Christ, which is called the divided house that cannot stand, known as Artaxerxes, the passing father, and the endorsement of the brothers and sisters and the mothers and the fathers that the church had pronounced themselves in with Caesar, and his money in the church with Artaxerxes to suffer the pangs of childbirth and uh, whatever idol presence that is put as decorated money in it, where all people watch TV, especially the Jesus Christ movies, where they're not actually Jesus Christ, or the prophet movies where they're not actually prophets, and everybody is in a falsehood of glory, of praise, and exaltation to rake in the gunfire of one's testimony, or to rake in all the money in terms. I'm using a slang. Gunfire could be used in a form of a sword, testimony. Today's world is not used with a sword anymore, in the many thefts of intellectual properties that are established with the saints known. I say that it's not proper for a man to wish harm upon somebody purposely, or it's not proper for a child to wish harm upon upon a person purposely. And Jesus Christ says, turn the other cheek, for birds of a feather flock together, and the perishing cup versus the cup of everlasting life, even in the perishing cup. If that cannot be loyal and take image of that image that is worthy in hell, that which the stars do feed off of at the throne, or the sword of light, and the helmet of salvation, and the breastplate of righteousness, and the belt of truth, and the shoes of gospel, the shield of faith, and the sword of light, all those things that are worthy in hell at the throne, that the stars feed off of for everlasting life in whatever manner. Uh, Even in that cup that perishes, if it can't take the image that is found worthy of such things for the stars to feed off of, it it is tossed into the land asleep and at rest, because it fall asleep in God's kingdom of Judah, which is the favored speaker for the Lord, also known as Levi, bare naked to the shame and guilt of others. And when it falls asleep in the earth, the rot of the earth eventually one day is orchestrated to rise up as the earthworms, or the dead and the deceased, the dead and deceased that had fallen asleep from all of its cries, from all of its pain, from all of its tortures and its strife, and its the will of war, the will of scales and war and death and life, and same for that that is tossed into the sea. Just as the rot of the earth rises as the worm, it is equally scribed on the body for the eating with that that rises in the sea as the penis fish. In every step, in every fight, in every triumph, or in every loss. But interesting is uh, interesting is the word of God when one is uh, with God in all betrayals. If you see the betrayal and still are able to accept that deliverance, and hold it as an experience for an inoculation to build strength against the next deck of cards full of tricks that one may put before you to walk on the hot coals cast down upon the heads of them who, in the Bible it says, them who burn, the cup of perishing, and then the cup of life, even in the perishing. The great awake in the rejected stone.